Always show respect to the people working in food service, especially in fast food. You never know what they're going through. That's something my parents always told me, but I still had to learn it myself to get it to stick. Though it didn't take long into adulthood before that happened. It was several years ago now, and my girlfriend and I were in the process of moving in together. Unfortunately, the movers had shown up many hours late, then drove off with all our stuff in their truck around 11 p.m., with the promise that they'd be back the next day. Since we didn't have any groceries to cook, we opted out for fast food. The Wendy's in our old neighborhood was always of stand-up quality, so we decided to check out the one a couple blocks from our new home. On the surface, it was a little outdated, but extremely clean. Cleaner than any fast food establishment I'd ever seen before. As we ordered our food, I noticed something strange. Their customer service was fine, but the employees looked really tired, like they might pass out from exhaustion at any moment. Usually the fast food kitchen is a fast-paced environment, with people on the move, yelling out orders and whatnot. But inside this kitchen, nobody moved from their post even an inch, and nobody spoke to each other, causing this eerie silence. Despite all that, our food came out quickly, and I was glad for it. Seeing their weary faces just reminded me of how tired I was. My girlfriend was also excited. Sure enough, the food was alright by my standards. My girlfriend, however, didn't get as lucky. Just a few bites in, and her face suddenly twisted with disgust. She dropped her sandwich and reached into her mouth.
Ew! There's a hair in my sandwich.
I rolled my eyes and sighed deeply. I knew her appetite had been spoiled. We were both in a bad mood, so even though we both knew better, it felt like this was just one more thing that had been done to us to make our day worse. My girlfriend was always too shy to ever return food at a restaurant or ask for a refund for anything. And to be real, I was usually the same way. But on this day, I was fed up. And more than that, I wanted to show out for my girlfriend. Since I hadn't been able to do anything about the movers, I'd at least like to make a stand to make sure she was fed right. So I fished the receipt out of the bag and stormed up to the counter once more. The employee at the register said nothing, as he stared through me with soulless eyes. "Excuse me, sir, but I found a hair in my food. I'd like a refund." Immediately, his eyes flared to life with a traumatized look of anxiety. It really caught me off guard. I was expecting resentment and annoyance, not fear. "If you like a refund, I'll have to get my manager. Are you sure you don't want this, sir?" Yeah, do what you gotta do, man. We're not hungry anymore." The kid didn't leave the register, just pushed a few buttons, then looked back at me with a clenched jaw. Only a few moments later, the manager revealed herself from the back. She waddled toward the counter, swinging her hips around on bowed legs. She was morbidly obese, as if she ate Wendy's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner day in and day out. Though she was clearly middle-aged, her face had a lot of acne due to the grease in her diet, and her hair was pale red and wispy thin, desperately braided into lopsided pigtails. Apparently at some point in this woman's past, she looked like the girl on the Wendy's sign. But at this point, she was clearly holding on to a dream that had withered and died decades ago.
"I'm terribly sorry about the issue with your food, sir. You said it was a hair? What has my father's restaurant come to? This used to be such a fine establishment. But don't worry, sir. I'll get this straightened out right away."
She turned away without giving me time to respond.
"Now which one of you sorry strays left one of your mangy, rotten hairs in this fine man's food, huh?"
Many of them darted their eyes away from her, shooting glances at me that read like pleas for help mixed with hexes on my entire family. I tried to step a little closer and say something to her that might bring her back to the counter. But that's when I noticed something that put me at a total loss for words. The employees were chained to their workstations by the ankles, with little handcuffs that blended in with all the polished stainless steel in the kitchen. I realized why they all looked so dead tired. They literally couldn't leave. And that's when the Wendy found her culprit. A fry cook who'd let a single lock of hair slip out from under his hairnet.
Oh. So it came from your sickly little mop, did it? You like your hair, do ya? You just want to let it all hang out, is that right? Well, let me help you set it free.
She struck the poor kid across the face, then kicked out his knees, sending him to the floor. She grabbed him by the neck and pulled him up to his knees. Holding him there, she took a clump of his hair and ripped it right out of his scalp. The poor boy screamed helpless in agony. The woman ripped off another fistful of hair and dropped it to the floor. She ripped out clump after clump until the boy was almost bald. Then, she dropped him like a rag doll. She started to walk back to the counter, out of breath, with hair still stuck in the sweat of her palms.
Did you want a refund?
Instead of responding, I turned right around and rushed to the table. My girlfriend was already on the phone with 911. I took her by the hand and led her outside, where we waited for the police to arrive. Within half an hour, that wretched woman was in handcuffs all her own, getting squeezed into the back of a squad car. These days, my girlfriend and I have since gotten married, and as we look forward to starting a family, we know that one of the first lessons we'll teach our kids is to never make complaints about fast food, and we'll never let them work in it either. I've seen just how strange people can act in isolation. When everyone had to go under lockdown, the only contact we had with our friends was over the phone through Messenger or video chat. Zoom, however, was something my friends and I had never heard of until we were all going to our classes on it. For no other reason than the fact that it was a novel thing, my friends and I decided to all get together on a Zoom meeting. Despite it being associated with school, we took it as a cool new way for all four of us to meet up in the hall after class, even though we were doing this in the evening. Unfortunately, with the free version of Zoom at the time, you could only host meetings for up to 45 minutes in length. So at the beginning of the call, Carrie, who was hosting, said we should all try to think of things to do together.
We should make good use of the time we have, right?
We agreed, but none of us had any ideas. I thought we were just going to chill and talk. I didn't know there would be games involved. Okay, what should we do then? You got any ideas, Carrie?
I'm so glad you asked, Tyler. I was thinking it would really set the mood if we all turned off our lights and lit up some candles, don't you think? Oh, that does sound nice. I'm getting my pumpkin spice scented one.
My buddy Scott and I looked at each other in the little secondary thumbnails, communicating a lot of feeling without needing to say anything. Like I said, people act strange in isolation. They get bored, start doing things they would normally know are a bit out of pocket. But Carrie and Sarah were pretty cute, so I went along with it. Okay. I took some candles from my living room, fished a lighter out of the junk drawer in the kitchen, then set myself up for some lonesome romance. No, some friendly video chatting in my room, which is of course exclusively candlelit. Then there we all were. Pale faces in computer lights surrounded by flickering orange darkness. Yeah, I guess this looks pretty cool.
I told you, didn't I?
So, what do you guys want to talk about?
Actually, I had another idea I was thinking of asking you guys.
It had already taken almost 10 minutes for all four of us to find candles, set them up, and light them, yet we hadn't really said much to each other in all that time. Regardless, Carrie had set the mood just as she said she would, so we all seemed willing to let her lead some more.
Do you remember the game Bloody Mary?
For a moment there was silence. Maybe it was lagging, or maybe Bloody Mary was lame now. You mean that thing from years ago where you go in your bathroom and turn off all the lights, then
Yeah, that one. I don't know, Carrie.
You know, I never actually did it. I'm down.
Yeah, Tyler, and you know what? We should all do it at the same time.
It took a little convincing to get Scott and Sarah to agree to this. They were wimps, I thought. I myself was a seasoned enjoyer of scary things. I was honestly wondering if 4 simultaneous summoning rituals might accomplish something, if only through group psychosis. Once we were all alone in our bathrooms with the door closed and the lights off, we found ourselves enveloped in darkness, and all we'd brought with us for light were the flashlights in our phones. Unsurprisingly, none of our faces were illuminated enough to be seen by the others, but we could still talk.
Everybody knows what to do, right? Okay, after 3. 1, 2, 3! Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
I stared into my mirror, straining to see something. Anything in the darkness. A good few seconds passed, and nothing happened.
Jeez, Carrie. Always coming up with some lame stuff. See you later. Wait, don't go! Let's do something else!
But by the time Carrie finished her plea for them to stay, Sarah was gone. And when I looked, I realized that Scott had left too. It sucked that my buddy had bailed on me like that, but knowing that I was now alone in a call with Carrie made my night seem like it was going pretty well. I tried to console Carrie somehow. Let her know that just her and I alone could make good use of the 30 minutes that were left. None of that seemed to land on her though.
Dang it! We messed it up! We forgot the candles!
Apparently, the candles were crucial. Obviously, she had this all planned from the start. She just screwed it up a bit. Something must have been distracting her. I wondered at the time if maybe it had been me. I feel like such an idiot. We both ran back into our bathrooms in the middle of the night, double-fisting lit candles. We set them both at the bottom of our mirrors. With this light source, we could actually see one another on the phone, as well as our reflections in the mirror.
How about this time we stand with our backs to the mirrors and show each other's mirrors on our phone?
Sure, Carrie. And so we did. And after her count of 3, we again chanted,
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary!
This time, I saw her appear instantly. My brain captured the glimpse I got of the creature, and has projected it on mirrors in the corner of my eye ever since. Even seeing it through just a video of a mirror sent a chill of fear through me so paralyzing I failed to speak. Some kind of tortured slender girl with tattered flesh and blood-smeared clothing stood in Carrie's mirror, staring with a face shrouded in darkness. Finally, I screamed, "Carrie, behind you!" The following moments were such a flash. Carrie screamed and jerked around. She dropped her phone as I heard glass breaking. Somehow, her phone landed propped up on something. I saw in the darkness of the image a candle on its side, then another flame, and with it more light. Carrie was on fire. The flame grew and crawled up her pajamas in a demonic blaze. But the worst part, something walked in front of Carrie's phone, silhouetted by the raging fire behind it, which was now crumpling to the floor in crackling silence. I saw a flash of Bloody Mary's hideous face. Then the call was cut short.
Someone's got whispering. I just heard it. Like it's trying to focus.
Well, something's with me all the time. I don't know what it is.
It's trying to focus, goes in and out.
If you look carefully at her shoulder here, you can see movement like the top of someone's head behind her shoulder on the right hand side, just there. Whatever this was, moving, there it is, moving behind her. You see the fingers.
Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. On February 9th, 2004, she disappeared from the face of the earth after getting into a car accident on Route 112. The events leading up to her vanishing are both cryptic and suspicious to say the least, and transform this from an ordinary missing persons case to a truly intriguing, albeit bone-chilling, mystery. Just before leaving her university campus that fateful afternoon, Maura emailed her professors, informing them that she was taking a week off school due to a loss in the family. That was a lie. Nobody in Maura's family had passed on. This got people thinking that maybe Maura was running from something. Or someone. Even before that day, Maura had been acting unusually. 3 months before she went missing, Maura had been caught using a stolen credit card to pay for meals at restaurants. 4 days prior to vanishing, a university supervisor noticed that Maura had broken down in tears. When they approached her, they said that Maura was just completely zoned out, no reaction at all, totally unresponsive. 2 days prior, Maura accidentally smashed her father's car into a guardrail after possibly consuming a few drinks. A few hours before the incident, Maura withdrew $280 from an ATM for unknown reasons. Sometime between 4 and 5 PM on the day of her disappearance, she set off in her car. She made no calls to tell anyone about her planned destination. It was sometime after 7 PM that Maura crashed her vehicle into a snowbank. The authorities arrived at the scene. Her car's windshield was cracked, the airbags were deployed, but there was no sign of Maura Murray anywhere. Expensive items, such as diamond jewelry, were found inside the car, along with empty bottles, Maura's AAA card, and a book called Not Without Peril, a guide to climbing in the White Mountains. Since that collision, Maura's whereabouts and well-being remain unknown. She simply disappeared from the face of the earth, never to be seen or heard from again. Some believe personal problems got the better of her, and she went missing on her own accord. Others believe that something more nefarious happened to her, that she was chased down by some obsessive stalker, or that she caught a ride with the wrong guy. For the longest time, there were no developments in the case. Then, exactly 8 years after Maura vanished, this video, titled Happy Anniversary, was uploaded to YouTube. This old guy just stares into the camera, laughing, gives a knowing wink. The words, Happy Anniversary, are then plastered over the screen. This Happy Anniversary video was uploaded on the 8th anniversary of Maura Murray's disappearance. It was uploaded by a user named 112 Dirtbag. Maura had vanished en route 112, and her father had famously used the word dirtbags to describe whoever had taken her. This was no coincidence. This old man wasn't just making an anniversary video for his wife and then suddenly remembered something really funny. This was intentional. It didn't take long before other users started making these connections. Word started spreading that 112 Dirtbag was responsible for whatever happened to Maura Murray, and this video was uploaded to torment her family, laughing at the fact that he'd gotten away with what he had done. This was brought to the attention of the authorities, and an investigation began. Despite taking the video off the site, the guy behind the channel, a man named Alden Olson, also from Massachusetts, was tracked down and questioned. People thought this was going to be a huge break in the case. In actuality, the whole thing was a hoax. He was just some old codger who'd become enthralled by Maura's disappearance and wanted to insert himself into it in some way. It was all just a joke. A big, funny joke. Good one, Alden. To this day, we still don't know what happened to Maura. I'm inclined to believe that the loss in her family she was talking about was in reference to herself. She then either started a new life somewhere else, or ended the one she already had. Still, even though this dirtbag wasn't responsible for her disappearance, it's completely possible another dirtbag was. We don't have any answers, so all we can do is speculate, and hope for the best.
On the evening of February 9th, 2004, almost 18 years ago, Maura Murray crashed her car on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, never to be seen again.
A Massachusetts college student got into a car crash 18 years ago and then was just never seen again. The cold case getting new attention now that the FBI has added Maura Murray to the nationwide missing persons database.
Her disappearance just days after the launch of Facebook. The case has been labeled the first crime mystery of the social media age.
People in the States hear a lot about Canada. How everyone here is so nice and overly apologetic. So much so that I bet many of them think nothing bad ever happens here. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. I served 5 years as a soldier, but I can still say without a doubt the most brutal and traumatizing thing I ever saw happened right here in my home country. The real problem with our famously benign disposition is that we don't even know how to properly punish people like in the story I'm about to tell you. Maybe I would have slept a little easier in these recent years if this had happened within the jurisdiction of the police down south. I was riding a westbound Greyhound bus through Winnipeg, only a day or so into what was meant to be a nearly week-long journey. We'd just recently gotten back on the road from a rest stop, the last one before it would get dark. We'd also picked up a few passengers, which meant some of the seats had been shuffled. The sun was beginning its long summertime sunset, and I was catching the last of the light to get back into the book I was reading. I was sitting by the window in the second to last row of the bus, just enjoying the simplicity of civilian life, the absence of conversation, and the constant rumbling of the engine and road noise. Then, without any trace of warning whatsoever, I heard a strained, desperate scream, like something between the cry of a neglected baby and the howl of a wounded wolf. I felt the warm spray of blood hit the back of my neck, saw it stain the pages of my book and splatter across the window in front of me. I slowly and gradually turned to look behind me, and saw a man in headphones being repeatedly stabbed in the neck by another man with a long hunting knife. 3 seconds ago, they were sitting next to each other, not saying a word. But now this poor guy was trying to figure out what was going on while his life force was getting sliced out of his neck.
Everybody get off the bus! There's a man being stabbed! Stop the bus! Get out! Somebody call the cops!
Suddenly, the bus driver slammed on the brakes and swerved to the side of the road. Everybody looked to the back of the bus in a single moment, which I remember quite clearly. All those alarmed faces looking towards me, turning to fright in a flash. There was a scene of panic as everyone tried to get off as quickly as possible. If anyone had tripped and fallen, I think they may very well have been trampled.
Whoa! Go! Go! Move! Move! Out of my way! Move! Move! Move!
The driver was the last one out. He waited for everyone to get down the steps before he got up from his seat. As he stood and walked toward the crowd of spooked people just outside, I saw the man with the knife sprinting down the aisle.
Look out!
The driver jumped out and I shoved the door shut behind him, getting it closed just in time. The maniac stabbed through the panes of the door, sticking the knife out through the crack. The bus driver and I held the door closed on the guy, trying to keep him contained in the bus. Just down the road, I saw a semi-truck pull off to our aid and hop out from his cab. I heard so much screaming and crying it was hard to stay focused on any one thing.
He's got a knife!
I saw the look on the trucker's face change up real quick when he heard that, getting a better judgment of our situation. He climbed back into his cab and retrieved a few crude melee weapons. He ran up to me and the driver and looked in through the door at the man with the bloody knife. The trucker shook a crowbar back at him, and that seemed to put the killer off for the moment. He backed away from the door, giving me a moment to breathe. The trucker looked around and took stock of what was going on. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but something about his presence was assuring to me. Like I knew that with him around, we could keep the psycho contained until the police arrived.
Everybody doing okay? Somebody's on the phone with the cops, right? Good, good. You there! You look like a strong young man. Take this. If he goes near any of these people, we take him out.
He handed me a hammer. I took it without thinking about it, just feeling better to have something to defend myself and these people. The following events were unbearably tense, like some sort of hostage situation. We weren't able to look away from him for a moment or he might try something else. But it wasn't the waiting at the door and guarding against the physical threat that was unbearable. It was watching through the windows what that maniac got up to while he was alone with his victim's corpse. He never said a word to my recollection. He never even looked panicked or on edge, but he sure kept himself busy. I watched in utter shock along with the trucker and the bus driver as the killer walked to the back of the bus and grabbed his victim's head and chopped it off with 5 or 6 swings. But he didn't stop there. He held it up by the hair and took it out to where everybody could see him and showed it off like a trophy. Then he just dropped it to the floor and returned to the body. I had to empty my stomach after I saw that. But if you can believe me, that wasn't even the worst thing he did. I caught glimpses of him eating flesh from the wounds he carved out of the body, coming back from the windshield just to show off the blood on his face. By the time the police arrived almost an hour later, the only people who were brave enough to stand guard that whole time were me and the trucker. After disabling the bus somehow, the driver chaperoned the group of passengers, which had long since run far away from the bus, to take shelter at the semi-truck. The police waited several hours for the guy to make a break for it, then ran him down. It's been 10 years, and I don't think I've gone a single night without replaying that day in my head. But you want to know what really terrifies me? The Canadian justice system just let that guy walk. Yeah, that's right. They pumped him full of meds in a mental facility for 5 years, and just set him back out into the world without so much as an ankle bracelet. Can you believe that? Nobody recovers from the mental state of decapitating somebody. I know I've never recovered from seeing it.
The man who beheaded a fellow passenger on a Greyhound bus may soon be walking the streets of Winnipeg unsupervised.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife. Repeatedly. Everybody was running, screaming off the bus. I was able to get his knife out and take a swipe at us, so we backed off the door, ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And when we all got up, we seen that the guy was cutting off the guy's head. So he had the head in his hand, and he just looked at us like this and dropped it on the ground.
As police officers searched Lee, they found a baggie containing a human nose, ear, and part of a mouth, all believed cut from Tim McLean's body.
Whatever its basis, the decision is made. Now it's a question of ensuring that both the public and Lee are safe.
There's a Wendy's in my neighborhood that I used to frequent. My friends and I would go there after school on Fridays or late at night after long days of hanging out. The convenience and the affordability of Wendy's just hit a special spot for the kind of people we were, but we don't go there anymore. We find ourselves laughing about a lot of unfortunate things, but even we don't really find this funny. Late one Saturday night, I was coming home alone from my friend's house. We all decided to skip the Wendy's that day since we'd been eating there a lot recently. But after hanging out for so many hours, I was really in the mood for some food. On top of that, I was almost too intoxicated to drive, so sitting in a drive-thru for a few minutes seemed both relaxing and rewarding. Wendy's drive-thrus are usually open till about 2 a.m., but I distinctively remember that around this time they'd started closing earlier due to health and safety measures. So when I pulled in at around 1:45 and saw that they were still open, I was a little surprised. But to be honest, my mind was so clouded that it didn't raise any alarm bells whatsoever. I was just excited to eat. There was only one other customer there, a van at the intercom placing their order. I pulled in behind them and only had to wait a few seconds before moving up.
Hi there. Welcome to Wendy's. How may I take your order?
I'll just have a 4 for $4 double stack with a Dr. Pepper.
Absolutely. And you're sure that's all you want? I can give you a lot more for just a little extra.
No. Just the 4 for $4 is good. Thank you. The banter struck me as odd. Not only had I never heard of a fast food worker be in such a good mood 15 minutes before the end of their shift at 2 a.m, but I'd also never been solicited to pay for more like that. But like I said, I was quite out of it at the time, so I didn't care. When I drove around the corner, the van from earlier was at the second window, waiting to pick up their food. I rolled to a stop right in front of the first window, the one you pay at when it's busy, but that's usually closed. I was once again caught off guard when the window slid open, revealing the hottest girl I'd ever seen since my school got shut down. Not only was she hot, but she looked exactly like Wendy herself, with the red hair and pigtails and everything. Except she was wearing a mask, so I couldn't see most of her face. Despite that, I was certainly captivated by what I could see, and her voice was just so hypnotizing.
Hey there, kiddo. The customer in front of you just ordered a lot of food, so if you want, I can take your payment here to speed things up, if you're paying by card.
Sure, thanks. I handed her my debit card without much of a thought. I probably would have done just about anything she asked. She kept the window open so I could see her out of the corner of my eye. A few seconds later, another van pulled in behind me that looked just like the one in front of me. I thought it was weird since I hadn't seen or heard the girl take their order. But before I could wonder for very long, she came back to the window brandishing my card.
I'm sorry, sir, but it seems like there's a problem with your card. The system says it won't accept payment without the PIN. Do you think you could reach over and punch it in? I'm really sorry, but I can't pull the keypad away very much. You might have to open your door.
Oh, don't sweat it, sweetheart. It's no problem at all. I cracked open my door and put one foot out onto the pavement, reaching through the windows and trying to punch in the 4 digits with a totally outstretched arm. That's when the vans on either side of the car unfolded with several masked men. I saw them in my peripheral vision for a second. Then they rushed over to me and made their move. My door got slammed onto my foot, jamming it painfully between the metal. I turned to face the one who'd slammed my door just to get struck in the back of my head with a hammer or something. My vision quickly faded as I felt my body clatter to the ground. When I came to, I'd been thrown into a ditch right next to the Wendy's. My car was gone. All the lights in the Wendy's wore off, and nobody was around. Everything I owned had been in my car. My phone, my backpack, my wallet. Literally everything except the clothes off my back and my debit card. The girl at the register should have held on to it, so I decided to knock on the window. But nobody answered. Very soon, the realization dawned on me that she'd been distracting me with her looks and her personality, while those crooks in the van waited for the perfect opportunity to relieve me of my vehicle. And if that wasn't enough, by the time I'd walked home in the dead of night and told my parents what had happened, she'd already emptied out my checking account. My head was pounding and my vision was still blurry, resulting in a hospital visit. After all of that, my friends and I no longer go to the local Wendy's. However, that didn't stop us from traveling a few blocks down to the other Wendy's location, which was still just as good. As unfortunate as the situation was, I'm lucky to have gotten out of it alive, and with all of my organs. But what still gets to me is how I've seen reported incidents still occurring at multiple Wendy's drive-thrus till this day. Like the story of a prankster tossing an alligator through a drive-thru window, or a homeless man slashing a large knife at the window because the worker refused to give free food. Either way, I always recommend keeping your doors or windows locked, whether you're outside or behind the glass.
James grabbed a roughly 3.5-foot alligator on the side of the road, picked it up, got it in his truck, brought it to this Wendy's behind us, and just hurled it through that drive-through window.
The man had asked for free food, but when the Wendy's worker reached into his own pocket, the man got agitated and started making slashing motions on the drive-thru's window glass.
I'm a full-time auditor and used to be a part-time investigator. No, I've never chased criminals. I was more drawn towards the existence of the paranormal. When I was 4 years old, I started seeing my dead grandma everywhere right after her funeral. None of my family members believed me when I told them Grandma visits me at night. When everyone was asleep, she would slowly walk into my room and sit near my bed, staring at me. Her glassy blue eyes never blinked. My dad took me to a therapist, as he thought I was losing my mind, and he would say that if I don't get treatment now, then I would end up in an asylum soon. While talking to the therapist, I could still see my grandma standing right behind her with a mysterious smile on her face. After a point, I realized I had to stop telling people that I could see my dead grandma since no one ever believed me. Grandma kept visiting me for a while longer before she suddenly vanished one day and never returned. Since that day, I've believed in the supernatural. I can't assure whether it was my grandmother or my imaginative mind playing tricks on me, but one thing I knew for sure is that when we die, we don't entirely disappear. The feeling of not being heard, seen, or felt by your loved ones who were once your everything scared me the most about life after death. So, as my hobby or passion, I would visit places that were said to be haunted. I went to study in LA where I met Violet. We became friends and fell in love. I've had girlfriends in the past, but Violet was different from them all. Surprisingly, she too had a keen interest in the paranormal sightings and theories about life after death. I soon realized that she was my soulmate. After finishing our studies, we got a house and moved in. Violet tagged along with my paranormal investigations, and we became an inseparable duo. After the incident with my grandma, I haven't seen or felt anything no matter where I went. I've been to enough haunted and doomed locations just to prove to myself that spirits do exist, and that I wasn't imagining it all in my childhood. But of course, there was no luck. I was on the verge of giving up on my self-proclaimed adventures when I came across a weird video on the internet. I was sitting in my living room and watching random YouTube videos when Violet drew my attention to a particular one.
Hey, that's the Cecil Hotel footage! I got chills when I watched it the first time.
Why? I played the video immediately, and Violet went on saying,
A Canadian girl named Elisa Lamb came to stay at a hotel near downtown LA. All of a sudden, she went missing. A maintenance worker discovered the body in the hotel's water tank when guests complained about the tap water. The last time she was known to have been seen, on the day of her disappearance, was by an elevator security camera in the hotel. In the footage, she's seen exiting and re-entering the elevator, talking and gesturing in the hallway outside, and sometimes seeming to hide within the elevator even though she was completely alone. Her death is still a mystery to this day.
Holy crap, how come I never saw this? The more I watched it, the more I realized how unsettling the footage was. Something was going on with this girl. One discussion led to another, and Violet and I had come up with a plan. We decided to go and stay at the same hotel, to check out the place after bedtime and investigate. Unlike other paranormal investigators, I used some gadgets of my own. To measure the sudden drop in temperature, I carried an infrared thermometer, a camera with night vision, and an EMF sensor to measure excess electromagnetic radiation. Yeah, I know. Pretty cool, right? We got into our car and drove to the Cecil Hotel. It wasn't far from our house. The interior of the hotel was no less than a royal retreat, but as we stepped into the room, we realized the catch. The bloated pale white wall and the smell of old bed sheets were all over the room. I did enough research on this place, and quite frankly, this hotel has had its tragic share of criminal activities and accidental deaths. The brutal serial killer Richard Ramirez also stayed here. And being close to downtown LA and Skid Row, this was a place of no questions asked. We unpacked our luggage and waited till midnight. Violet was standing in front of the window and watching the traffic below, when suddenly she turned towards me and said,
You know, people kept drinking the water of that tank while Elisa's corpse floated in it. How do you think the water tasted?
Whoa, why the hell would you want to know that?
I have an idea. What if we, as in I, reenact the elevator scene just like her footage at 3 a.m.? This might help us to connect with her spirit.
What rubbish are you saying? That makes no sense, Violet.
Come on, it'll be fun.
Violet got adamant, and out of curiosity, I too went along with her stupid idea. I thought, what harm could come from doing this? The elevator of this hotel was one of the sketchiest elevators I've ever gotten into. The entire vibe of this place was like sitting on a damp bed while sniffing dusty air. I set up the camera at the corner facing the number plate and door of the elevator. Thankfully, there were very few people living there at that time, so people hardly used this elevator. Time went by and we waited and waited. I might have dozed off near the laptop while watching the live footage of the elevator when Violet called me.
Wake up! It's time!
I looked at my watch and it was 2:50 a.m. The hotel was in pin drop silent. As I exited the elevator and stood in the corridor, I got a major The Shining vibes, as if waves of blood were going to rush in towards me at any time. Violet hugged me and said,
"Wish me luck."
I casually smiled and told her to be careful. I was going to watch her the entire time, and I told her to take her headset in case she needed to call me. We found out that all of the Elisa Lam footage took place on the 5th floor, whereas we were staying on the 2nd. Violet got inside and waved goodbye. She pressed floor 5 and the elevator door started to close, creating an eerie sensation in my heart. Once it closed and started to move up, I rushed inside the room to take a look. Violet was standing there and constantly smiling and waving at the camera. She was acting cool about all of this, but I was pretty nervous at the time. My palms were sweating like crazy and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen for a second. As soon as the elevator door opened on the 5th floor, Violet pressed the door hold button and called me. "Are you all good, babe?"
Yeah. I'll start now, and I'm keeping you on a call so it'll be easy to stay connected.
Absolutely. Don't worry. I'm right here.
I'm not worried. You should relax.
She got out of the elevator and began her reenactment. I watched her silently as she went on imitating every single action of Elisa. I mean, I was stunned to see her accuracy. She didn't miss a single move. After a point, it started to disturb me to watch my girlfriend behave like the same woman who died an unnatural death here. After 15 minutes of this insanity, I couldn't tolerate it anymore. "Violet, can you hear me?"
Yeah. How am I doing?
She replied, while waving her arms in the air like Elisa Lam. "Babe, I think this is enough. Please just come down. I'm getting creeped out by all of this. Also, there's no sign of temperature dropping or anything supernatural here. Enough now."
You're such a kid.
She made fun of me and laughed, but I went on pleading with her to come out. "Look, if you don't come out now, then I'm coming up right at this moment."
Okay. I'll come down.
She got in and finally listened to me. I stood in front of the elevator waiting for her to come out. I was pissed at myself for agreeing with her stupid plan. The number plate was flashing 5, 4, 3, 2, and the elevator ding took place. Violet stood with a sarcastic smile while the metal door started sliding open slowly, but her smile didn't last for long. As she took the first step to come out of the door, it closed hard, trapping her head in between and strangling her neck. She screamed in pain.
"Oh my God, what's happening?"
I tried my best to pry the door open and free her, but it was completely stuck. She screamed in pain as blood dripped from her mouth and onto her face. It was a horrible scene to watch. Her entire body flopped like a dying bird. She was trying to free herself, but nothing helped. The more she applied pressure, the more blood squirted out, cutting the flesh on her neck. I screamed for help, but no one came. I pressed the elevator button like crazy, but it stood like a rock. Violet's head was stuck so badly between those doors that it seemed impossible to get her out without opening them. I was about to call room service when suddenly the elevator began to move, but the door didn't open. The elevator started to go up while Violet dangled in the air, crying for help, and I watched the inevitable happen right in front of my eyes, standing like a statue. After a point, her head got stuck to the ceiling, and the mechanic force ripped her head off from her body like a dismembered Barbie doll. Blood poured like a fountain. That was my last paranormal investigation. It's been a year now. I'm still attending therapy to cope with this horrific memory. Her death was declared as accidental. The security footage proves she was all alone in that elevator, and it was nothing but a major mechanical malfunction. But I know it wasn't, because the footage that my camera took Add something extra to it. The cops reviewed my footage too, where Violet's headless body can be seen shaking on the elevator floor. Surprisingly, there was no sound, except sweet elevator music playing in the background. Not a single scream of hers was recorded.
21-year-old Elisa Lamb went missing on January 31st. She'd been staying at the Cecil. This surveillance video shows the UBC student acting strangely the night she went missing. Once again, the LAPD is saying the body has just been recovered.
Adding to the mystery, surveillance video from the hotel elevator, the last known pictures of Alyssa Lamb. They show her pushing buttons in the elevator, hiding, looks like she's hiding there, waiting in the hallway for somebody, and then at one point waving her arms around. We know that she came to Los Angeles about 4 days prior to when she was reported missing. Not quite sure why she came here or whether she visited anyone here. Come back here.
Nearly 3 weeks after Elisa Lamb went missing, a body has been found in a water tank on the roof of her hotel.
I get chills every time I see the Wendy's sign with the little girl on it. I know that sounds weird, but you'll probably feel the same by the time I'm finished. It's all because of this one time back in the 80s, when I would still go there. The Wendy's by my old neighborhood was one of the really old locations, where they didn't even have the girl on the sign, just the black and yellow poster with old-fashioned hamburgers in big letters. But of course, everyone already recognized the trademark big smile and red pigtails. And that was the whole reason I went to Wendy's. Just about every day on my walk home from school, I'd go a couple blocks out of my way just to pass by and see if a certain someone was working that day. And when she was, I'd always go inside for my usual order. It's been 40 years since those days, but I remember every detail about her. She worked at the register most days of the week, and she was sure the face of the business. She looked as close to the cartoon of the redheaded girl as anyone ever could, but as a fully grown woman. 17-year-old me couldn't get enough of her. I cherished every moment of small talk I could manage, and it made my every day just to know that she recognized me. We even had a little rapport going.
Hey there, Jack. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine now. Now that I'm out of school, I mean.
And will it be your usual order again? Number 1, no tomato?
You know me so well. She must have been 5 or 6 years older than me, but I didn't care. I fantasized, I'll admit it. I started looking forward to going there to get me through the tougher days at school. I definitely didn't tell any of my friends about it, though. I swear I wasn't planning anything weird, it's just teenage boys are passionate, you know? But anyways, I got familiar with the routine, so I was quick to notice when something was out of the ordinary. There was one day that I almost didn't go in because of the long line of customers waiting at the register, but then I saw the red hair. I got to the back of the line, and through all the grumbling of impatient customers, I was able to see and hear an argument between the girl and her boss in pretty clear detail.
You're late, again! Don't you see how many customers are backed up?
It wasn't my fault! I got stuck in traffic!
You expect me to believe that garbage for the 5th time this month? Do you understand how many customers I watched walk out while you left the registers unstaffed? Do you understand how much money you're making me lose? I can't afford for you to keep this up.
Why can't you get someone else to run the register, huh? Why don't you do it? You're so out of touch. You'd run these people out the door with your attitude. I keep them coming back.
Oh, please. It's all in your looks. You don't do a thing I couldn't.
I'm about to quit if I don't get some respect.
I'll take that as your 2 weeks' notice unless you get to work.
From that point on, I couldn't tell what happened. They quieted down too much to be heard, probably on purpose. But the line got moving eventually. And after a while of waiting, I finally got up to the front. She looked like she had had a crappy day, so I did my best to cheer her up. Hey, don't quit, okay? Or I won't get to hang out with you anymore.
Oh, don't worry. I was bluffing. I can't quit. I'm too broke.
Well, I've got just enough money to keep buying these burgers until I get your number.
Maybe you'll get that with your first burger as an adult. Okay, kiddo?
Hey, that's coming sooner than you think. Number 1, no tomato, please. But unfortunately, that was the last day I saw her. Well, the last day I spoke to her. I came by the very next day. The first thing I noticed was that they'd updated their sign to have the Wendy's girl. I thought it looked alright and pretty accurate, but I didn't really see why it was necessary. Regardless, I went inside without looking. Well, I preloaded a joke about how she finally made it big or something. But when I entered, she wasn't there. Somebody else was at the register. Her boss. I stood in line anyway just to ask, "Hey, boss man, where's Wendy?"
Place your order, please.
Okay. I didn't order anything. I just walked out without a word. I didn't like Wendy's food that much. I just came through for the girl. I figured she quit, which admittedly stung a little. Despite that, I continued to walk by every day the rest of the week, just to take a peek inside and see if she was working again. I never did see her behind the register, but I did notice something else. That sign, the one I thought they'd upgraded, it seemed a little off. Day by day, it changed, shifting slightly, warping, slipping, changing in color. And then, in one world-shattering moment, it dawned on me. The face was only on one side, and it was not the official Wendy's mascot. It was her. The girl disappeared at the same time the face appeared on the sign, and the more I looked, the more obvious it became that it was no cartoon. As I stood there, jaw dropped to the floor, I swear I saw it slip down another inch or two, becoming clearly lopsided. The smile got cut by a wrinkle in the skin, turning it into a desperate, soulless frown. My memory of the following few months is pretty spotty. I suffered a mental breakdown in that moment that I didn't recover from until I'd spent a few weeks in a psych ward. Though I do remember a few details from the court case, which was the talk of the town for a long time. It was her boss that killed her, all because she showed up late to work a few times. And he thought she'd attract just as many customers up there as she did behind the register when she was still alive. When I was a freshman in college, my school had moved all of their classes online. I did all of my lectures on Zoom. Everyone complained about it, but I honestly didn't mind. I got to keep living at home for another year and save money on transportation and dorm expenses. There was only one class in my first semester that gave me any trouble: geography. I thought it would be an easy A, but for some reason, I just did terrible on every test. It was an evening class at 8 p.m., so I guess I was usually lacking in focus for most of it. It was always the last class I had before I snuck out of the house to hang out with my friends from the fraternity I'd recently joined. My parents didn't approve of that decision, so I had to keep things low-key, as I would leave through my window after they went to sleep. Rolling through the night with my friends made up my whole college experience at that point, but it didn't help my grades. So it seemed like a good thing when the geography professor, Mr. Higgins, offered some extra credit towards the end of the semester. Before we begin today's lecture, I want to let everyone know about something. I know that several of you are having some bad luck with my tests, so I decided to give everyone a chance at some extra credit before the final. Just stick around after the lectures and answer some questions correctly, and you'll be rewarded. Because I didn't want to get a bad grade in one of my first college classes, I decided to go for it, even though it meant I'd have to keep studying until 9 or 10 p.m. After the lecture was over, I realized that quite a few other students were taking the opportunity. The problem was, the questions were ridiculous. In what postal code would I reside if I moved to Colorado 50 kilometers due west of Denver? You have 60 seconds to answer. What? How am I supposed to answer that? It was like he intentionally made it next to impossible to answer correctly and in time. Oh, looks like nobody got that one. See you after the next lecture. Of course, in college, they don't make it easy to get extra credit. But I thought that the harder it was to achieve, the more it would be worth. With that in mind, I kept going to the after-lecture sessions trying for those extra points. Every time, fewer and fewer kids showed up, and every time, Professor Higgins came up with another impossible question. I never got a chance to answer any of them, but I was honestly hoping to get pity points for being the only one who continued to attend the whole time. One night, just before the final, I was the only one left.
Well, Ryan, it looks like it's just you and me for this one. You'll have to excuse my absence from the video. I, don't have access to my webcam at the moment.
That's okay, Professor Higgins. It won't stop me from getting extra credit.
Yes. You know, Ryan, since you've been so persistent, I think I'll give you an easy one this time.
Thank you, Professor. This was my chance. I thought I might just get a good grade in the class after all.
What would I find if I went south down Main Street from the university, took a right on Pine Avenue, turned left onto Maple Court, then went down to the cul-de-sac and up to the side of a house with the red door?
A chill ran down my spine. I left the Zoom call and immediately closed my laptop. I tried to calm my breathing, but it wasn't working. Those were directions to my house. How could he know that? Why would he ask me that? Just then, all the lights in my house went out, followed by the distinct total silence of a power outage. No blowing of the heater, no distant hum from the fridge. Nothing but absolute quiet. I stood from my desk and started to walk out of my room. I was hoping I could just go flip the circuit breakers in the laundry room and everything would turn back on. But when I got to my bedroom door, I heard a knock from somewhere else.
Ryan, you didn't answer my question.
I looked back to my window just in time to see him.
The answer is the window you forgot to lock.
I was in complete shock. It felt like I couldn't move, but I quickly snapped out of it. Mr. Higgins had got the crown of his head through the window. I dove across my room and to my window, quickly shoving him back onto the roof. My phone wasn't in reach, so I yelled,
"Leave me alone or I'll call the cops! Somebody help me, please!"
Just then, my dad ran into my room with the bat as he darted towards our scuffle. Mr. Higgins' body was almost completely inside of my room just as my dad swung the bat into his head.
My head! Get the hell out of my house!
My dad swings the bat again and bashes it right across his face. A few teeth fly out of his mouth and his body collapses to the ground. He was out cold. We immediately called the cops and Mr. Higgins was arrested for breaking and entering. I don't know about anyone else, but I have to say my first year was pretty brutal. They say learning from home is supposed to be safer than in-person learning, but I digress. I work in middle management for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I can't say which one due to the NDA I had signed. It would compromise my identity. I'll be using fake names for everyone I'm about to mention. You'll understand what I mean. I used to work in a small, typical office setting with a handful of other people on a specific project for the company's greater interests. But every once in a while, even to this day, we were reminded of just how powerful our boss at the top of the ladder really is. We work with a lot of trade secrets, and all of that information is sensitive. What I can say is that we weren't able to maintain our usual level of productivity over Zoom. A time came when we had to permanently switch to working from home, which meant we couldn't go to the bland old office anymore. Our team manager, Mr. Burns, had worked at the company for decades. The project we were working on was probably going to be his last one before retiring. The problem was he was a dinosaur with computers. We wasted a lot of time during all of our meetings just teaching him how to operate Zoom. Simple things like unmuting his microphone or figuring out how to add people to the call. We eventually realized that a couple of weeks had gone by without getting any work done. I got a little frustrated and sent an email to HR requesting some IT training for Mr. Burns. I tried to make it come across as respectful. I really did. But I guess the executives had a different interpretation. Just a few days later, at our next meeting, things went completely sideways. Our old manager was nowhere to be seen. He'd been replaced by some corporate shill with a face shot full of Botox.
Good evening, faithful employees. Kelly from HR here. We noticed that this team has had a dip performance recently, we've decided to restructure the group and offer incentives where necessary. I'll be acting as the interim manager until we find a replacement for old Mr. Burns.
Honestly, the only thing shocking to us about Mr. Burns being replaced was just how suddenly they kicked him out. I felt bad for putting in a negative remark about him, but for that moment I was focused on looking good in front of my superior. That Kelly creature didn't say a word after she introduced herself, just watched and listened to us. After the meeting, I sat in front of my laptop for a while, just confused and worried for some reason. I zoned out and didn't really do much work for the rest of the day. It was Friday after all, and I wanted to relax for the night. Unfortunately, I wouldn't get the chance. I was watching TV in my living room when I got a text on my phone. It was from the company HR number. It read, "Answer your front door." What? My heart jumped a little, but I grumbled it off. Start working from home, and you never get time off. When I answered the door, a 6'8" bodybuilder in all-black company attire stood in front of me with his arms crossed. "Good evening." "Hello, John. I'm Kyle from HR. May I come in for a moment? These hours are outside of my contract. Would you kindly invite your associate inside to discuss a major promotion?" Just from the way he said it, I figured I shouldn't say no. "Sure, get in. Just don't break my kneecaps, okay?" "That won't be necessary, John. If you're interested in the management position, all you need to do is go through our Zoom orientation." "Really? Then why'd you come to my house to tell me that?" "The meeting contains, sensitive information. You don't got clearance yet." I was very quickly starting to realize what I'd just gotten myself roped into. I felt like I'd just been forcefully initiated into the mob. Well, no sudden movements now. "Okay, sure, let's do it." The lumbering thug followed me to my computer and gave me a Zoom code. He stood just inches behind my chair, towering over me as I sat at my desk. When I joined the meeting, there was only one other member. Their video was on. The camera pointed at a man tied to a chair beneath a harsh spotlight. "Wait a minute, is that Mr. Burns?" "HR appreciates your initiative in adapting to this new working environment. The old blood just couldn't keep up. So as an incentive, you get to see what happens to those who threaten this company's bottom line. We appreciate the tip you gave us." I was shaken up. What was about to happen? I stared at the live video call as I saw two men approach Mr. Burns. They began by beating his hands with clubs, then they kicked over his chair. They wrapped his face in a rag and started waterboarding him. "Why are you doing this? He was just a little slow with computers. I never meant for all this to happen." "His computer was full of viruses. He leaked trade secrets everywhere. We can't have such an incompetent fool around. He deserves this." I was in shock. This really was like the mafia. I wasn't allowed to look away from the meeting. They'd ceased with the waterboarding and moved on to jumper cables. "Congratulations on moving higher up in the company, John." I still work for that company, in Mr. Burns' old position. I've seen a few of my coworkers disappear from the company in the last few years. I've thought about quitting many times, but it seems like every time the idea takes hold in my head, I get a visitor from HR. Take this as a warning to support your local small businesses, because even though I'm posting the story anonymously, there's a good chance I won't have enough functional fingers to type out a follow-up.